I guess that's the way I like it. That makes me rumble. Don't we rumble? Float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Ah, rumble, young man, rumble. Hey, that's what we're going to do. We're going to rumble.
This week on Fight Stuff. A, quote, funny school fight over screenshotting stories. Who set this to slappers only? It's combat jujitsu, baby. And an exploration of chronic traumatic encephalopathy in the ancient world.
You're the one still texting his bitch, yo.
Get that beat. Get that beat.
Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah. That just out of nowhere. Wow.
Get that bitch. Get that bitch, bro. Get that
Kids
bitch.
today. But, okay, so it kind of paces down, and it's like kind of a bummer of a fight. Like, you know, kids shouldn't be, but then, look at this little guard work here.
Yeah. So that first chick got sucker punched by a massive. There's a little bit of a size advantage here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
She essentially has to work from guard, defend against some of the overhead stuff.
Yikes.
Wow.
Yeah, right? Okay, so.
All right.
This is like. I like we're doing a good job of getting a nice variety of genres of
fight clips.
Clips in these viral fight clips. So let's talk about what happens literally.
Sure, let's describe this for the audio only listener. Again, we'll try and post this on our Instagram page so you can get a sense for what we're talking about.
This video is founded on Reddit r/fights, which is usually the first place I go to look for stuff. LOL, they started to fight because of the girls screenshotted people's stories.
Yeah,
So,
P.S. I screenshot people's stories all the time.
Oh, yeah. Like, what are you doing
Send them to
screenshotting
people,
stories? So that alone is funny, but you get a typical, like, high school confrontation with these two girls.
This feels like possibly junior high.
You think junior high? Yeah, I guess it's possible.
Yeah, that one girl is pretty small. I mean, the bigger girl is obviously on the bigger side, but, you know.
Right.
It could be freshman, you know.
Yeah. And, it accelerates real quick.
Yeah.
0 to 100 real quick. They're just chatting. I don't know. It's kind of the word bitch is thrown away and that bitch and things like that. And
people screenshotting stories. And then out of nowhere, a sucker punch from hell is thrown.
Yeah, just bop. And, you know, clearly somebody who doesn't know how to throw a punch, which is thankfully.
Yeah.
Like this, you see this thing a lot. There was like a viral clip a long time ago of these like older ladies, like a middle-aged woman punching another middle-aged woman that looks like in the parking lot of like a Walgreens or something.
Yeah.
And she does this kind of weird punch that's like vertical and almost like you're hammering like a nail in the wall.
But with an angled fist.
Still punching with the front of your fist, but kind of going like, bah! Like this weird smack on the nose thing.
Like you would take a magazine and say, no.
Yeah. And it's clearly people who like don't know how to punch, which is thankfully because like you do a lot of damage to someone, which is going to be a subject, a theme of the whole episode.
Absolutely.
With a blow that is unexpected if you really know how to throw your body behind it. But it looks like one of those like it's like the most uncomfortable, like those bop on the nose. You know what I mean? Where you're just like your eyes water and it's so uncomfortable.
No, I mean, listen, if someone bops me, if my wife like playfully taps me on the nose, my eyes water, and she's like, "What's the matter? Are you crying?"
Zeke,
yeah.
Are you okay?
What do you mean?
Your wife like just playfully bopping you on the nose. You want to tell me about something?
No, man, it's cool. It's
Are you
okay.
guys
Don't worry
okay?
about it. No, it's fine.
Does this happen a lot?
No,
Just think.
I mean,
You okay?
it happens.
How much does this happen, Zeke?
Only when I deserve it.
All right, that's fair then.
Yeah, exactly.
Not funny. Dark. Too not funny. Little funny.
Little funny.
So, whatever. So she clearly becomes overwhelmed emotionally. This is the moment she's chosen. I need to start the fight now.
Yeah.
And I don't know what. I mean, I don't know. Was the other girl like making good points? I really just don't know what was going on with quote unquote that bitch and the screen capping and whatnot.
The problem with viral fight clips is we never get full context
I
as
know.
to what was leading up to it.
And also the beauty of them.
Exactly.
You get to really fill out that story for yourself. What is going on at this
Maybe
junior
someone was
high?
actually filming the entire thing, but they're like, ooh, we want a viral fight clip. We're going to just chop it down to the good stuff.
I like that also, P.S., I just realized the title of the actual video is just Funny School Fight. Which
well,
is like,
I mean, it's kind of true.
it is kind of true. It's
But it's
also
not
like,
all that funny.
I will say rhythmically, this one's not as funny. Like, because it's less of like a joy. It's just there's something a little dark about this one. This is like a
It's
kid with
not
hurt feelings.
There's not like a Schadenfreude moment where you're just like, oh, that guy needed to get knocked out.
Right,
or like,
exactly. There's no like, oh, that guy deserved it. He was clearly being an asshole. It's just like clearly a fight between two kids. But notable, I think, just because of some tactics that show up in this video.
Yes,
where
unexpected, by the way.
Yeah, and I wonder if the girl who defends herself. There is some kind of like justice feeling. Like it always feels good when whoever didn't throw the first punch ends up
in top position.
Top, you know?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I don't know who is the quote unquote real bitch here. Or whatever.
Yeah, we really don't. But based on the clip that was shown, you know,
this girl takes a shot.
She hits her. You know, ends up in top position.
Well, hair grabbing, immediately to hair grabbing.
Right.
Which
Great
is
tactic, by the
great
way.
tactic. It's the clinch of the street. I mean, like, use that hair. And I think that's what I'm so impressed by is that the second, like, once they hit the ground, the girl who's been attacked quickly asserts a guard position.
Really effectively.
Yeah, she's just
like she has her hooks
recomposing.
in, like, yeah.
Her feet are going to the hips of the attacking girl, all while hanging onto the hair. And I'm very into this, like, I've been doing a lot of lapel game lately at jiu-jitsu, where like modern jiu-jitsu is full of all these crazy like worm guard, and you use the belt as like a point of contact, and you can really tie people up. It's like really impressive. And I have never seen somebody use straight up handfuls of hair instead of a collar, instead of a lapel.
And what's interesting too is that blocks a lot of the haymakers that are coming down from the top.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Well, because when
it's
you're
almost like a hockey sweater a little bit. Like it's sort of
Yes.
just like, yeah, go ahead and try to throw those haymakers, but like you're not getting around.
If you can't
like,
posture up, you can't. Like if you are, for anybody listening who's never been, and I wonder too if this girl's like, has she had some training? Jiu-jitsu is so much more common now, or is it just from seeing the UFC and stuff like that, or does she just have good natural fight instincts? I don't know, but. If you're on bottom and somebody's trying to punch you on top and you land on the ground, a terrible place to be, the first thing you want to do is like control your opponent's posture, because whoever's on top of you, if they really want to hurt you or like land hard bombs, they've got to posture up. They got to get their head and chest up high so they can get enough distance and range. Plus they can kind of control their trajectory more and like start sneaking
and
those
just
punches
generate
around.
force too. That's the other.
Just start smashing through any guard you might do, which PS is horrible on the street if you're actually on the ground because there's concrete under you. So like bouncing your head.
tatami mats for you to bounce your head off
Yeah,
of.
exactly.
That's bad times.
Like those blows you may be receiving, you may be absorbing through your arms, but you're still going to be like bouncing on the ground. It's going to suck. It's going to be really uncomfortable. So we see this girl controlling the posture with big handfuls of curly hair and keeping her hips, the girl who's attacking her, keeping her hips away from her, which further breaks the posture and allows this girl to start recomposing. She starts to sit upright, and we see a pretty impressive sweep. I don't believe
I didn't catch what kind of sweep she did, but I was just like, I was impressed initially.
She never lets go of the hair, I don't believe.
So she has control of her opponent's head.
Yes, you basically have like a nice collar and head control. And then it's a very nice little, it's almost like not quite a flower sweep, but has a similar, it's basically just like a technical stand-up. She feels the pressure switch, and you see her do a little little technical stand-up. There's a little move in jiu-jitsu. I just call it kind of like a ninja get-up kind of sometimes, where it's just this like, you basically put your front foot in like a lunge and roll over your back shin and come to a strong
That's one of the ways I warm up my hips all day, every day.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite, like totally. That's like the first thing I go to jiu-jitsu, more than shrimping even, this like roll up and down.
Yeah.
And you see her do it and come to a really decent top position, knee on belly, basically. It looks like she's caught maybe in a quarter guard and a full mount, and she starts to get punching there. Now, the girl on the bottom's doing a good job of also grabbing some hair and trying to do it. But as these things tend to go, they're getting broken up at this point.
Right.
Start to finish, this whole clip with including the fight of whatever little bit of narrative that we get.
The storytelling element that we
is
get.
51 seconds.
Right.
So you're talking about maybe 30 seconds of interpersonal combat, and even that feels long. Like in a not funny way, while they're kind of watching them figure out who's going to come out on top on the ground.
Right.
But you get a very jiu-jitsu moment of the smaller opponent coming out on top, starts landing some shots while they're like tussling around. Bad position of being even worse for the person on bottom because she has no guard.
Yeah.
And then they get broken up, which is good. Let's not let people actually fucking hurt each other. But, you know, It's good to remember too, like about like what a fight is versus like a sport fight. Like
Yes, and
preparing
there is
for,
a big difference between the two.
Yeah, because it's this blitz moment. It's like which again kind of creates like a little bit of situational awareness moment for this beginning when they're having this conversation.
Yeah,
like be aware of the distance you have from people. My first martial arts instructor, I asked him because I was in high school at the time, and you know, guys do that thing when they want to bully or whatever, where they get up in your face. You know, they're like coming like right up chest to chest, and I was always like, I don't know what to do here. I was like, this is a bad position. I'm like, you know, you're already at disadvantage. They're so close in your face. If he's bigger than you, this is a big problem.
Sure.
And I didn't do any grappling at that time, so I didn't know anything about like body locking or clinching or duck unders or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I was doing kung fu, and I asked my martial arts instructor, I was like, what do you do? Do you have like a move? Like, what do you do if someone's like up in your face? And he was just like, hit him. Like before he gets there, you hit him. And I was like, what? You can't. And he's like, yeah, you have a personal bubble. If somebody comes within your arm's reach, like, you're allowed. And he goes like, I mean, this kid, he's like, didn't your father ever tell you that when you're having words with a man, you keep your respectful distance? And I was like, well, no one told me that.
Yeah.
And no one told this kid that. And that like in this day and age of like, you don't know if you're going to get, you know, I think like fighting is so like, if anybody gets in a fight, you're getting suspended.
I feel like that was drilled into me early and often, where it was just like the first person to throw a punch, instantly suspend. Like, even if someone's in your face, like the minute you touch them, suspended.
Yes, and I think that is correct. I think that's something to keep aware of, but I also think it's possible to not punch someone as soon as they come close to you, but get your hands out in front of you, creating space and distance, and you back up and be like, don't come close to me. Like, don't touch me. And like, hang out there. Like, but learning that you have this bubble, because what happens is this girl like can't conceive that she's going to get struck. And she's just standing there talking, and mid-sentence, bah, that's when the punch comes.
Yeah. I mean, this was the first time I saw this clip was when Jarrett hit play. And it's shocking because you're kind of just like, hey, I wonder what's going to pop. Like, you're just like, oh, shit, I guess we're watching a fight.
I mean, we get a little bit of a feeling of what that girl might feel like.
Right.
Because it's like in the middle of that totally unexpected, oh, we're watching a fight video now.
I mean, I don't get into verbal confrontations that are this crazy anymore. But
I never. I just like. I honestly don't understand how people get in fights. It seems so easy to not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless I suppose.
But that's also coming with maturity. That's coming with training and knowing that no one ever wins in a fight. Like, generally speaking, like,
nobody wins. No, absolutely. At the very least, these girls are definitely in trouble. Much trouble.
Yeah.
I will say also that girl who's on top, she's gonna have very badly skinned knees. Like that, I'm just saying that's something that we don't think about that much. But like, I one time training with a friend years ago who was like a personal trainer and did other martial arts, and I was like pretty young too. And we're like, let's go, we'll do some sparring in the parking lot of this fucking gym we used to work at. He was a guy who did a lot of like kung fu-y kind of martial arts, and I did a lot of jujitsu already, and kind of was one of those people who like didn't buy jujitsu to some degree. You know? Which,
yeah, I mean, why would you believe it?
It exists, you know, it still exists. Like, I don't know about the ground stuff. I think I would just do this. And so I had a dumb ego too, and so of course our little like sparry touching, it accelerates till we're like clinching and fucking fighting.
Really, it accelerated.
In the fucking parking lot of a personal training gym in the valley. And like,
oh shit, you were already out here.
Oh yeah. No, I'm an idiot.
Do I know who this?
I don't know if you do. I don't think you do.
Okay. All right.
But
I was like, it wasn't Lopez, was it?
No, it wasn't Lopez. That would never happen. Lopez is like the bad. No, never. But basically, he knows him though. But like, I ended up mounted on top of him in a parking lot, and just insistent, being like, I'm gonna. Like, you don't think this works, you know?
Yeah.
So I just stayed on top for a while,
yeah.
like landing little light shots, not like doing that, but riding them out as like to make a point. And I don't know if I ended
you
with
were
a submission
fighting
or whatever.
for the pride of jiu-jitsu at this point.
Kind of, just to make the point. I was like, dude, I did Wing Chun. I love Kung Fu and shit too. I love to make apologetics all day long. But you have to understand this is real. You're bigger than me and you're stronger than me, and you have to fucking know if you want to do MMA. This is real.
Yeah.
And damn, did I pay for it in the skin knees that I got, because I was wearing shorts. And so on asphalt on Ventura Boulevard. And so it was just like horrible bloody knees that took like weeks to repair.
I hope it was worth it for your sparring
I
session.
mean, I get to talk about it now. So.
Jiu-jitsu!
Yeah.
Did you get up and yell jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I was like
Vitor Belfort?
Fight you for the pride of...
That was always one of my favorite things that Vitor always did, where he's like, when he first started in his career, he would sprint at someone, smash him in the face, punch him so hard.
Just 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2,
and then immediately start yelling jiu-jitsu.
I don't remember that, and that is so funny. Is that true?
Yes.
I remember the 1-2s. I mean, they called him the Axe Murderer, Vitor Belfort, because he was...
No. Axe Murderer is Vanderlei Silva.
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. I was picturing Vanderlei, that like forward running punch thing.
Oh, well, hold on. No, Vanderlei doesn't throw straight punches. That's the difference. He's all round punches all the time.
Who's the one that would just run across the cage?
That's Vitor Belfort.
All right, fine. Yeah, that's amazing. I love that.
He immediately drapes himself in the Brazilian flag, and him and his teammates start yelling jiu-jitsu, and like,
dude, I miss the flag drape move. Like, people don't drape themselves in flags enough anymore after winning fights.
Well, that's because the UFC has become a corporate entity. And
really?
Yeah. Once they did away with getting your own sponsors and having the fight flags behind you and all that stuff, once it became a sport as opposed to like...
Right. That's true. I remember that makes me think of like the days of Condom Depot written on the bottom of cages, or like George St. Pierre being retired yesterday. There were some old clips of him in like one of his earliest fights I saw. He's just wearing like shorts, like, you know, a UFC fight, like naked basically, but on his back in huge black letters is like temporary tattooed like goldenpalace.com.
Holy shit.
It's insane. It's so funny. And
that must have been one of his early fights.
Yeah, very early, because like back then there weren't a lot of sponsors. goldenpalace.com was a common one. Condom Depot was a common one.
Yeah.
And it was just like Mickey's. Remember Mickey's sponsored early UFCs? And like Mickey's was all over, which is just so funny. Like,
well, I
couldn't
just
be more
remember
on the nose about
that,
your brand.
like, you know, because once the Fertittas got involved, like, they were just like, fuck Golden Palace, like, station casinos are where it's at.
Oh, yeah.
Because they, you know.
Yeah.
So, like, I remember people were always trying to, like, get a way or find a way in with additional sponsor money, but I didn't realize that he had...
Dude, it's very funny. I mean, I'll show it to you, or we'll, like, try to find the clip of it or something.
Yeah, but it's like Condom Depot was a big one. Dynamic Fasteners was one, and I was like, I don't even know what a fastener is, but these guys are spending cash on like, fighters.
They love MMA. I mean, MMA was so crazy when it started. We'll do like a walk down memory lane that time, but like our first time seeing it live. I mean, I went in Hammond, Indiana, the community center in Hammond, because you couldn't do it in Illinois. It was still illegal. So we go over the border to Indiana to do these like fights for nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, well, whatever. So that's our clip of the viral clip of the week. Is this funny fight? I think what was the quote unquote funny school fight or whatever?
Funny school fight.
Funny school fight.
LOL. They started to fight because of the girls screenshotted people's stories.
It's very Burning Toast the way this is written. It's very like hard to make
I wasn't
sense of.
sure if
I know. It took me several tries. LOL. They started to fight because of the girls screenshotted people's stories.
My brain hurts just reading that.
It's
title.
rough. It's rough.
Yeah.
Anyways,
we'll throw it up on the Instagram.
I hope you guys didn't get suspended. I hope you guys didn't snitch on each other. Just like we worked it out. Nothing happened.
And that's part of it that I kind of like, is like, I think you may have worked it out.
Honestly, I mean, one thing I think about conflict in general, like interpersonal conflict, is we have this aversion to it because, you know, we're civilized, quote unquote, or we try to be.
We try to be.
And that is a good thing. It's good. It's good to avoid. But there's an aspect of like, without premeditation, like the kind of fights that wolves have or dogs have, they're like these instantaneous outbursts of like, someone's determined to be the dominant or submissive, it's over, and then it's done. And there's kind of a quality to it, almost like a chemical reaction. Like you mix two chemicals together and their electrons go to work and do the thing, they freak out, you know, like baking soda and vinegar explodes everywhere until the chemical reaction settles into like a stasis of like all our extra electrons are spoken for and whatever, we're all linked up again and now we're neutral. And I kind of feel that way, like sometimes that's all fighting is like these kids, like the tension gets too high, like about whatever we're arguing about, whatever's happening with this screen capping and your fault or my fault or whatever. I don't care. And the punch happens. Yeah. And then they have to tussle for less than a minute.
Right.
And then that's it. Break them up. Okay. Well, that's enough. And then that's it. And it's like hockey fighting or something. It's like,
dude, this reminds me
my point is it's not like bad. You know what I mean?
No,
it's just
absolutely.
natural.
When I was playing volleyball at Boston College, somehow I got into a physical fight with one of my teammates.
That's like the most brother shit ever. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like playing volley. Like, anyway, what happened?
So I was the starting setter of this incredibly not good Boston College volleyball team. Like, my high school team would have kicked the shit out of this team. Like, and of course, they thought I was a ringer coming from Miracosta High School. They were like, "You played for this nationally renowned program, right?" Now, being under 5'6" and playing Division I volleyball,
Very impressive.
At the time, yes,
That's
yes.
very impressive, yeah. Because it's like a lanky person sport, right? I mean, that's the whole point.
All my teammates were well over 6 feet. We had this guy on our team that was 6'9".
You're like the Bugsy Malone of volleyball.
I was.
That's amazing.
Bugsy Malone?
Am I wrong? No, Bugsy Malone is the kid who fucking is the movie about the gangster kids. We could have been anything we
You're
wanted
thinking of
to be.
Muggsy Bogues?
I'm thinking of Bugsy Bogues, and I said Bugsy Malone. Do you know who I'm talking about, Bugsy Malone?
I actually don't.
The gangster Disney movie, the musical. It's like a gangster movie about prohibition gangsters, but they're all played by like 12-year-olds, and they're like, we got to get those guns, and then these guns that look like Tommy guns, but they shoot like whipped cream, like pie. It's so weird, and it's a musical called Bugsy Malone.
I've never.
So I haven't
even
of
heard
Bugsy
of this.
Bogues, but said Bugsy Malone.
Yeah. Okay, because I mean, it hurt my brain again. I was just like, wait a second. Like,
we wanted to be. We got to get those guns. That's all I remember of the movie. Children in like 3-piece suits.
So I'm playing for this horrible volleyball team.
Yeah.
And we're not good. And, Boston is not known for its volleyball scene. And so I had displaced this junior as the starting setter, right? And he was not too happy about it. And over time, you could tell that the resentment was like building up, and he was just getting weirder and crazier. And for some reason, we had a Canadian coach.
Wow, dude, this is a movie.
Yeah. Well, there are other stories that I've detailed on storytelling nights that we'll circle back on. But so our Canadian coach, who's familiar with hockey fighting, and was just sort of just like, well, gee, like he was like, we were going back and forth, like talking shit, and he was just like, sounds like you guys got to work it out, right? And I was like, yeah, fine, fuck it, I don't give a fuck.
How old are you?
18.
Okay, all right, wow.
Yeah. Decent shape. They had put us on ridiculous amounts of supplements.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I went from 118 pounds, Zeke Thomas.
Wow.
To maybe 135.
Okay, that's a significant. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was mostly creatine and water weight and all that stuff.
Sure.
Like, so. But anyways, like, I was
water
like,
weight's still weight.
Yeah, I guess.
Water in your muscles is still muscles.
Right, but at this point, I had no jiu-jitsu training, no wrestling training.
No.
I had 6 years of Tong Sudo, Taekwondo training, and didn't know that this kid was a high school wrestler.
R.I.P. Zeke. Bye. How much did he weigh?
He probably had like 6 inches on me, and probably had about 30-ish pounds on
volleyball. Yeah, you're in trouble. Wow.
Yeah.
Not good.
The quickest double leg takedown in the history of double leg takedowns occurred. And where did I land? On that hard ass wooden volleyball court.
Killer.
Yeah. And just immediately put me on my ass, and I was like, oh. Like, I mean, I remember the moment as like my legs are facing the top of the gym.
Yep.
And going, this was not a good idea.
Right. How did I get here?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Before I'm like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Like,
well, work that out.
Yep. But you know what? We worked it out.
Yeah.
Like, I now respected him. I mean, it didn't change the fact that I was still the starting setter. But, like, I had a newfound respect for him.
Sure.
That's
a beautiful story.
But it was like a healthy expression of violence that needed to happen. My coach wasn't wrong.
Yeah, I think the thing is like if we had that understanding about it and like could understand how to contain that.
May I also say that it never escalated at any point. Like at that point, it was sort of like, okay, well, you're a better fighter than me. Like, that's cool.
Yeah,
it wasn't like I was like, I'm going to go find a stick. And
exactly. Like, I'm going to have a rock and I'm going to wait for him and I'm going to like, which I think is the thing that happens now.
Like, yeah.
It's like people have pride and they have all this stuff and they're like, oh, I got something said about me, like my manhood or my whatever, and I'm going to find him later and get revenge. Like, that's where it gets scary.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, part of that has to do with not having a healthy understanding of it, of being like, sometimes this happens and it doesn't mean that much, you know, as opposed to like, I don't know, by shunning it and being like, anybody who does this, it's the worst thing you can ever do. You're going to be banned from the school forever. You're in trouble, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be this mark on you forever. And that is what makes people feel so crazy about it and being like, I have to avenge myself, or, you know what I mean? This like horrible ego shit.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, whatever. It's like, a momentary.
I haven't thought about this in 15 years.
Right.
And it brings me joy. Like,
and little does this guy know, we're going to kill him.
I can't even remember his fucking name either.
We're going to find out.
I mean,
15 years
you're
later,
right.
we're going to
I'm going to
kill him.
Research the Boston College 1998 roster.
As 50 Cent said, the DA can play this motherfucking tape in court. This is premeditated murder for beating you up on fire.
Whoever that guy was that one time.
I hope you enjoyed your moment of victory, kid. All right. Well, that's very, we should honestly, I almost want to just say right now, next episode should just be stories about stupid fights you get in with like friends and brothers. Yeah. Like just things that are just like, I don't know why, but we're fighting now.
Yeah. Well, you had a good one that you posted on Instagram the other day.
Which one was it?
Well, you guys were in Hawaii.
Oh, yeah, that was a good, that one is, well, Kyle, I have like several brothers, and Kyle started doing jiu-jitsu finally. Kyle outweighs me and is much stronger than me in basically every way you could be, but he was also very white belt, and I've been doing jiu-jitsu for like a long time. Right. So sometimes our brotherly scraps accelerate, and the fact that he's got a little bit of jiu-jitsu now just makes them more fun. But yeah,
but also
there's a million
more dangerous too. Like that's the other
for
part.
For sure. And he keeps surprising me. I always say I think I do worse jiu-jitsu against him too because I devolve into brother mode. Yeah, and so I'm like, this should be working instead of like just flowing and doing jiu-jitsu and responding to the situation. I'm just like insistent. I'm like,
I must impose my will.
Yeah, I'm like, how are you fucking getting out of this stupid ass armbar? Like, this doesn't make sense that you're doing this. It's just brother power.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, on that note,
you're gonna make me watch a Bugsy Malone clip. Mm-hmm. Wait, this is live action?
Yeah.
Hello. I'd like to tell you about a new movie. It's a gangster musical called Bugsy Malone, and it's kind of unusual.
Jodie Foster, by the way.
Parts are played by kids around my age. Now, hold on a minute. I can see a few of you out there choking on your popcorn at the thought of 200 kids in ringlets across the screen. Look, I'm not too fond of kids myself. But this ain't no ordinary kids.
This is insane.
There ain't never been a movie like it. Take a look. Your name Robinson? You work with Fat Sam? So long, lover boy.
Okay.
New York, 1929. Prohibition. Gang warfare. A world of gangsters, showgirls, and dreamers. Bugsy Malone. Quite possibly the most unique motion picture for years.
1976, right?
And if that isn't enough, Bugsy Malone.
I don't know how I feel about that.
It's way more insane than I remember. Told you it was a song.
This is. I understand. I feel like I understand you so much more after
We're gonna stop watching this because a few things going on here.
Yeah.
Well, the most important one is like it's insane how long old movie trailers feel.
Right.
That was a minute and a half, and that was unbearably long. Whatever. It's an insane movie that makes no fucking sense. That it's just straight up an adult story about adult things, showgirls and gangsters and blah blah. And they're just like, we're just gonna make them kids.
Yeah. What's the big deal? We're just gonna make them kids, and we're gonna shoot.
Yeah. Well, you can't be machine gunning kids on screen. We can't kill. I'm like, oh no. It's gonna be whipped cream. We're gonna
essentially jizz on these kids.
God,
like,
that is 100% what that movie was.
Yeah.
Dark. Jodie Foster is in it. Unfucking real. Anyway, Bugsy Malone.
Ugh.
We could have been anything we wanted to be.
I understand why you gravitated towards that movie so much. It has so much of what you love.
Why? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, it's like
because it doesn't sound very good right now.
As a child, you're just like, it's kids in a gangster movie.
Yeah, that's
with
definitely
guns,
true. That's definitely true.
And it's like, it's me up there. It's
Yeah,
me.
that's
I could have been
yes.
that.
That's what 100% that is accurate.
And it was musical theater, which I know your entire family
Yeah, for sure.
loves.
I also think the subtext of like the over-adulting, sexualizing of kids that is very evident now that I'm a grown-up watching it.
Yeah, okay, that was the part that
yeah.
I found super problematic. I was just like, oh, okay.
Showgirls. Yeah. When I was a kid, they're like, they're kids too. It's fine.
Yeah, I never quite
Now that
understood what that line was. Like, I'm like, if I'm 12, I can like girls that are 12.
Yeah, you're like, am I a pedophile for being attracted to a 12-year-old girl when I was 12? You're not. You're not.
Right.
The short
Just the
answer
fact
is
that you're
not.
asking that question means you're not a pedophile.
Oh, God.
All right. Well,
all right.
Should we talk about combat jiu-jitsu?
Well, yeah, so the current event today, speaking of beating your meat, not really. This is bad. I'm sorry. Combat jiu-jitsu. Speaking of squirming around with people and slapping them a little. No,
we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah.
Worse. This weekend's sports.
Yeah, they're doing. They're having a CJJ, a combat jiu-jitsu, which is I think an offshoot of Eddie Bravo's stuff, EBI's stuff.
Yeah, I feel like this is definitely an Eddie Bravo creation.
Yeah, I love the concept of combat jiu-jitsu. I honestly haven't watched a ton of it. I mean, I've seen that like Chad George clip over and over. There's
he posts a ton of stuff, and I'm always super fascinated by that.
What it is a submission grappling show. Like so the rule set is just grappling, with the exception that you can open hand strike people.
Yeah, so it's got a little bit of the pancration style rules where
right.
Except you can't. Can you punch to the body?
Kick? I don't know if you can kick. I don't think you can punch to the body. I think it's all open hand strikes.
Yeah, it's all open hand slaps,
which probably has to do with some like legality stuff. Like they're like, we want to do jiu-jitsu, but we want to do it like
and especially with tournament stuff. Like what they're doing tonight is a tournament. So like most people, I don't know if you have to get a fight license to do this. Like,
well, the big disappointment was tonight was supposed to be Gordon Ryan and Fabricio Verdum were going to have a combat jiu-jitsu match. And
right, which I was very interested in.
Because Gordon Ryan is pretty unarguably the best like grappler in the world right now. He has faced anybody you can name who's at the top of the game currently and beaten them, usually with like submitting them. He's very, very good. And he wants to make this jump to MMA.
But he's being smart about it.
Yeah, and he's done we haven't seen him strike at all publicly. So this would be the first kind of foray into something where there would be like some kind of striking with jiu-jitsu.
Right, as opposed to just straight no-gi jiu-jitsu, which obviously he's super dominant in, but striking changes that game significantly.
Yeah, completely changes it. Like, my first jiu-jitsu coach was like, I started learning jiu-jitsu because I went to a kung fu school that guys that wanted to do MMA, so we started cross-training on some ground stuff. And the first jiu-jitsu coach I had, who was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, very good, he was like, basically said this thing that was like, you take a black belt, hit him in the head 2-3 times, he's a brown belt. Hit him in the head a couple more times, he's a purple belt. And there is some truth to that. Like, jiu-jitsu completely changes when you throw in strikes. Because
otherwise you put yourself in ridiculous positions that you're just sort of like, well, you can't strike me, so I'm going to hang out in the silly guard position.
Exactly.
Like,
and things like deep half guard and different inversion games like Berimbolo and stuff like that totally do function. They can function with strikes also. They're not like, you just have to be smarter and faster and you can't hang out there. And it definitely just changes the game of the consequences. So combat jiu-jitsu is really fun to watch as a concept, and also to do a little bit. Like if you train, you can do it. You don't have to go full force.
No.
It keeps you honest with your jiu-jitsu. You should train your jiu-jitsu with some strikes sometimes.
Yeah, but it just changes the way you approach like ground game as far as like just like you don't want to really hang out in bottom position at all. As opposed to when you're just playing straight jiu-jitsu, you're kind of like, let's see where this goes. You're kind of hanging out, like as far as the stuff that I tend to do.
Yeah.
But like if someone starts raining slaps down on you, it definitely changes. You're like, oh well, maybe I should advance position.
Yeah, and like so, Gordon Ryan was supposed to fight. And he's got this knee surgery. I was trying to remind myself who he had fought with. Yeah, that's right, against Rocha, Gabriel Rocha, whatever. I always said it Rocha, even though I know all Brazilian names start with an R or like an H.
Yeah.
But I just don't know why. In my head, I was always like, oh, that's Rocha.
João Rocha?
I know, it's silly. But
come on,
but anyway, they had a Kasai, they had a match, and Gordon Ryan won it. I think he got a submission out of it, too.
I think he won. No, he won by, this was one of the few things that he didn't win by submission. Which he was disappointed on, but then like, it came out that like his knee got seriously destroyed.
Yeah, he might have.
What was it? LCL surgery? Yeah, look at that. LCL surgery. And then I think he also had like a torn bicep or something else too happened.
So he unfortunately had to drop out of the thing tonight. And there sounds like there's some fun. So like Kevin Casey's fighting, which he's like a local guy at Black House. He
he's one of the big coaches over at Black House. Amazing grappler.
Yeah, so there's definitely some cool stuff, but I don't know, just the idea of combat jiu-jitsu is more like what we were going to chat. We just wanted to bring up was like, I just like it. It's fun.
Yeah, I think I might start messing around with it over at A4.
Yeah, just put it. Yeah, it's good. It's good to do. Look up Chad George slapping the hell out of someone. He won. He was the first combat jiu-jitsu champion or whatever. Then I got a belt for winning the tournament, and he's a really impressive. It's that old style pride. It's probably the best striking, like best basic guard pass when you're allowed to strike, which is you just throw the legs to the side and then the arms that went swings around and comes down to the big yeah, and it is a loud full palm slap. You can throw palms really hard too.
Absolutely.
Like they can do damage, which brings us to, I guess, what I want to talk about for my second half of we're returning to my conceived second perspective, a history of violence.
Yes. So this is the segment of the show where, Jared and I, each episode, we trade show and tells. And, generally I speak about legends and legendary fighters and fights. And Jared talks a little bit more broadly about the history of violence.
Yeah, so there's some thought maybe I had that I thought about or I was interested, I want to know more about or whatever. I think we'll definitely switch it up a little bit sometimes. There's some, I like Genki Sudo. I really want to do a Genki Sudo Legends. But
listen, our last episode really started just igniting all these different ideas of just like, oh man, like, how about Japanese like fighting in general? Like,
yeah,
I mean, this hasn't even gotten into like Japanese pro wrestling, which is so amazing.
Amazing, yeah. It's just a different there's a different culture of it, of like around the showmanship and the sort of. I don't know.
Well, even with their MMA, like if you watch an old Pride match, people sit there quietly and respectfully watching the ground game with like intent, and when someone sweeps, it's like. Applause because they appreciate the ground game so much, as opposed to like most UFC crowds or American crowds that are just like the boo birds start coming out and they're just like smash him in the face, stand him up, let's go.
Yeah, this one is
and it's just like you could hear a pin drop on some of those like MMA matches, and it's incredible.
Early Pride was like sort of disorienting almost to watch because it was weird to see like a stadium full of people that was so dark for one. They really like make it like a show. Like the ring is very illuminated, everywhere else is very dark, and just so quiet. It's just this whole auditorium watching two guys fight, and just like you can hear the like sound of the canvas like bouncing around with the springs under it. Anyways, today,
Jared, what do you have for us today?
Well, I think I'll start just talking about this image of ancient warrior figures, both in literature and in history. Like Napoleon, who was known to be this incendiary, short-tempered figure, and Alexander the Great, who died at the young age of 32, only a year after his, second in command and best friend, and I believe lover also, but I'm not positive from what I was researching. He died, and like that. Alexander went off the rails and was inconsolable and died only a year later from a disease. And then also like in literature, like the Rage of Achilles or like King Lear being this like old warrior king who's like crazy. And I was thinking, I wonder what we know about CTE now, like which is, concussions and the effect that they have on like degenerating the brain.
And traumatic brain injury in general. Yeah,
right. And those effects on people emotionally, could you recontextualize some of that image of the crazy warrior kings or warriors or whatever, even down to like the idea of these like Vikings or Conan, this kind of idea of a warrior, someone who goes off the rails and is sort of a dramatic figure and
a berserker.
Yeah, like that could have to do with CTE, like CTE in the ancient world. Yeah. So I did a little bit of a deep dive. I started just going into that. That I guess is the topic I thought I was going to explore and just share what I was like learning about with it. So I think it's worth noting about like what CTE does, and they didn't really start studying CTE and looking at it seriously because obviously we've heard this a lot with like football. So like the 80s and like the early 90s, and since then, a lot's coming to light about just how damaging an impact is and how little it takes to like and impact you for a long period of time. And it seems to come from not just one impact, but repeated impacts. That the impact is not allowed to heal, and then you get more. And with the general
like
attitude,
subconcussive ones, but if you continue to go,
right,
the
if you don't take the
damage is
time to
actually
rest,
exponential.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And so one of the first things I wanted to think about was like, well, does it take a lifetime of this? Does it take a lot? And it really doesn't. There are these studies that I found and instances of people, teenagers like in their 20s, very sad stories who like were normal, neurotypical sort of like happy, normal people who killed themselves in their like young 20s. And when they look at their brain, they find signs of this CTE from football injuries, basically, like impacts that you get in your, which arguably you could say like developing brains are even more susceptible.
Sure.
But that it doesn't take much to create a very distinct change later on.
Sure.
So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about like CTE just before I get into some of these like details about like what CTE is and what it does. Basically what it is like when you have a brain trauma, you get this, it's called tau clusters, TAU. They're proteins that perform the function of stabilizing microtubules. There's this whole thing about it. It gets very like into it. But basically these little protein clusters start forming in your brain and they start like fucking shit up. So possible signs of CTE include memory loss, confusion, personality changes, including depression and suicidal thoughts, erratic behavior, including aggression, problems paying attention and organizing thoughts, and difficulty with balance and motor skills. So we see this, and we've known about this like forever. People know about like, punch drunk, like punchers, sort of sickness. They had some name for it. I won't go looking for it right now.
Yeah.
But we've known about this for years that boxers get this. It was interesting to note when I started looking into if anybody else has done this about CTE in ancient soldiers, there's a lot of people who've started looking into PTSD in ancient soldiers. And post-traumatic stress stuff, some people think as early as Mesopotamian times, there were texts talking about soldiers having these experiences with what psychiatrists say were like, that's definitely post-traumatic stress disorder. They talk about in this old Mesopotamian texts, like soldiers talking about speaking to the ghosts of people they had killed as if they were there, and that kind of like being a very common symptom in like modern of like whether it's nightmares or reliving the experience. And as I was going down this deep dive, I found this one really interesting article, basically this guy talking about whether or not Roman legionnaires had PTSD.
Right.
And there's really interesting arguments on both sides. Basically the one broad argument that most of us, I think, are prone to think is that like our brains haven't changed that much in thousands of years, 100,000 years. We basically have the same software, hardware, wetware as soldiers then. So of course, experiences that we have now, we could say they had too. That being said, there were two major arguments that said maybe it would be different for people back then. Like just when we're talking about PTSD, not even the CTE concept, which was one, that just the context of death in the world then was much different. People died all the time. They had slaves and thought of them as like not even people. And that was so common. And it was just like this different idea of what people were and life was and what good and bad things were. And that's fair. There was also this other thing about basically saying that the nature of warfare was very different. While we think of it as very brutal and scary, this idea of like knives and being these big crushes of people, and like we talked about in the pancreation episode, pancratists with shields banging into each other and, whatever, sounds very vicious. But in fact, you had two things going for you psychologically, which was a feeling of more control over your destiny, because with the absence of bombs, you knew the times you were fighting. War now, and it's a relatively new thing over the last like 130 years or whatever of humanity, is like a 24-hour affair. You never sleep. You don't know when the attack's going to come. And on top of that, it's artillery and bombs. You don't know when those are going to happen. So it creates this sense of like never relaxed, never resting, always in this state of duress. And then on top of it, these concussive forces of bombs out of nowhere that might kill you. And that you didn't have that in ancient times.
Sure.
Which led to two different perspectives, and one that I thought was interesting to see, like, oh, so people have been thinking about this, which was, one, just that sheer thing about like we fight in the dawn and I'm not going to get killed by something out of the sky, arrows, but like you still have a little more sense of like control over your own destiny.
Sure. You're not in a perpetual high stress, like elevated state.
Yeah.
As you are today in modern warfare.
Yeah, and like staying in, which isn't to say obviously be so stressful and horrible, but just that 24/7 total war trench thing is like didn't exist.
Right.
And then the second thing they said was that with with bombs, with explosives and things like that people suffer in war now, you do get a lot more concussions.
Sure.
And they literally said this in the article, was we can't rule out what were the effect of CTE on people. This idea of PTSD showing up in the ancient world. Did Roman soldiers get PTSD? Well, maybe they didn't get PTSD from what we consider it, like this idea, because we've always looked at PTSD as a stress thing, or like you see something horrible or something terrible, you
experience something horrible.
A psychological thing,
right.
Basically,
yeah.
Not a physical one. But this article was like, we have to consider the possibility that even now, PTSD is caused more by potentially concussive forces or the combination. Yes. And that in ancient times, you would have that also. So there's a couple branching thoughts I'm just going to share more stuff about. One was I went down this hole about like, well, how easy is it to get a concussion? And was it to get a concussion? Because you had helmets. Like how, and the short answer is
football players have helmets.
Yeah, real fucking easy. There's a great YouTube account, a guy named Scholagrim that I like to watch. Who's like, he's like a Western martial artist, basically. We'll probably do an episode about that at some point.
Sure.
But European swordsmanship, things like this, that basically what knights did and fencing throughout all that time, we don't think of as like martial arts because we still have a picture in our head of like basically Eastern martial arts as martial arts.
Right.
But this guy does all this recreation martial arts stuff. And he does a bunch of videos testing helmets, and they're really entertaining. They put them on not on himself,
okay.
of course not. No.
Oh no!
They have like a dummy head that also has some mimicry of like how soft the head would be and how hard a skull would be inside. And they put a helmet on it, and then they smack it with different stuff. They smack it with swords. They smack it, and I watched a few of them. I watched like the lowest end of the spectrum, which is just like a leather cap with some metal on it, basically.
Yeah.
And then I watched the higher end of the spectrum, like a really well made, thickly padded metal helmet. And the short answer is you might not die immediately, but you're getting fucked up no matter what.
Yeah.
Even with, I was surprised to see the leather cap stopped a sword blow from cutting through. Like the sword was not getting through that head, but that head was getting fucking dented, by like just a one-handed sword. And when you add in stuff like hammers and maces and axes, everything, even at the high level of these really thick helmets, were rattling that brain around. And then you could look at, and then they get to the part where like warhammers with spikes on them. And some of those eventually just are like pop holes, like right through, even reinforced. Sometimes it would skitter off, but sometimes it would, they get a hole.
It would penetrate. And yeah.
But the short answer is you are getting head trauma. And now, so what it takes to get a concussion is not that much.
Right.
I found an article, this study at University of Denver in 2010 said it takes 95 Gs of force to have a concussive effect on your body. So that's a high number. That sounds high. Like 1 G is the standard gravitational pull of the Earth. I think they said fighter pilots regularly feel about 9 Gs. I think 5 Gs is where they say is like normal for humans to like start to get woozy and not be okay.
Sure, yeah.
And I think the max Gs they got on a person on a rocket sled was like 45 Gs.
Wow.
And that's sustained. We're talking about like something different for an impact of 95 Gs. They said a normal football player in a game who gets hit experiences 105 Gs of force. So that's enough to get a concussion every time you get fucking tackled.
Now, is there 95 G number? Is that like the average? Is that the mean? Like, or is that just like, no, every single person, no matter what their size, strength, whatever.
That's the thing. I think that is variable, and this doesn't take into account. There's so many other aspects of what causes, like bracing. Boxers, they said there was this one study I found, and they were measuring the Gs of some of these strikers at like just 50 Gs.
Sure,
but people get knocked out all the time.
Yeah.
So I think when we're talking about a football player, they're measuring this whole body running into a body, slamming into the body, and when you think about that, one of those a big like 300-pound guy like sprinting at you and that your body is suffering an impact of 95 Gs.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about something different and measuring something different when it's like how much whiplash and G are you getting on your spinal cord?
Sure.
You get hit on the button. And are you braced for it? Do you see it coming so you're all like bunched up in your traps in your neck and so you take it okay?
Sure, yeah. And that's something that's always talked about. Like there's this old adage that it's like, it's not, the punch that knocks you out is the one you don't see coming.
Right.
And, And that's in my experience, that's been true. I've seen it happen in the gym too. Like, and
this is pertinent to the combat jiu-jitsu stuff. When I was reading about how they measure G's, there's something they call jerk like force, like how they measure a jerk, like an instantaneous thing, and it has to do with the measurement has to do with the spread over the area of impact also. So that's another thing. How precise is your strike? Am I hitting with just like a knuckle where it all gets centered into a knuckle on your chin or your jaw? Or is it like a slap that spreads out across your face or things like that?
Right. Where it's diffused across a greater surface area, things like that.
But the short answer is it's very fucking easy to get a concussion. And it's really interesting to note too, in modern warfare, now that we're like starting to understand this, they've been looking much more into the effect of concussive forces and concussion, and it's linked to PTSD. And there seems to be some links there and some like kind of like scary stuff they're finding out too. I found this article about on an NPR thing that was reporting it, that just firing a rocket launcher, when you see guys like with a rocket launcher on their front, just firing it in practice, whatever, they're like, that may be giving people concussions. Fuck. And the guys who do it say when you fire, even though the explosion goes out the back of the tube and goes like, and that's what it always looks like, the guys who fire it say it feels like someone punches you in the face because your head's right next to this explosion.
To a literal explosion.
Yeah, and then I started wondering, like, well, how little does it require to, get a concussion? And I was kind of trying to find out if, like, just a gunshot, just being near a gunshot, or like the sound of a gunshot, not being shot, obviously, but the concussive force that you feel, would that be enough? And I didn't find anything that said that would be enough to give you a concussion, but I did find an interesting article on a police blog about hearing loss. Yeah. And obviously, if you don't have hearing protection, they talk about, like, you really have to understand, even when you have headphones on, earmuffs, and even when you have like earplugs and earmuffs, that still is like something you're experiencing. Even if you are deafened enough that you're not going to get the sound wave, like the audible one, there's something that you can't fix for is the shock wave of the concussion. And that, like, they're like drawing, basically they're starting to look at is just the shock wave of being near a gun or in a range with shots going off around you and reverberating on. Not the sound, but just the shock wave impacting the delicate parts of your ear, and just the shock wave alone, is that enough to cause some deafness over time?
Yeah.
So CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. This one article was saying, they've seen symptoms of it in people as young as 17. Jesus. And but they don't generally begin appearing until years later after the onset of head impacts. And again, this other article was saying common changes include impulse control problems, aggression, depression, and paranoia.
Yeah.
And so I guess at the conclusion of all this, I was like, I guess there's not like a clean thought, but it seems to me that when we think of like the image of a warrior, the image of this kind of thing, I think a lot of stuff is associated with just maleness, about impulse control and aggression and paranoia and those kind of things.
And all those traits that are associated with maleness. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
And then those are associated with PTSD. They're getting worse than just as a psychological trauma. And I guess it kind of like came to the conclusion that, like, whether it's a psychological trauma or a physical one, it's interesting and sad and informative to know that the impact on your brain is the same.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess like the conclusion is one that keeps happening on this thing, that like just avoid fighting, avoid fucking conflict that's like truly violent.
Yeah.
Which is a funny thing to say when in the beginning we're like, sometimes people just got to work stuff out. They got to have a little tussle. But I do think there's a big difference. Back to that wolf pack thing. It's interesting to note that wolves, which are notorious for being these creatures that like have dominance and submission struggles, it is extremely rare that inside of a pack struggle a wolf kills another wolf.
Right.
And that like they do have these struggles all the time, like you see sometimes dogs at the dog park have, that sound scary, they look scary, but they won't end in a death. They're just like, they're settling, figuring out what's what. And I think there's something that humans instinctively might do, which is like figuring out what's what. Like that fight we watched with those two girls, there's not going to be any lasting trauma. Like we said, the punch the girl throws is not enough to not to be horrible. Not like we see people who get slept. Like some of those videos of people get slept on their feet and they hit their head on the concrete. Those are very scary. Or like that could actually have some really fucked up effects.
Potentially, yeah, absolutely.
But that there is a thing about some people like working a thing out or getting a little wrestling match or whatever. But I guess like ultimately you just, the avoidance of it in general is correct. And it's just fascinating to see. I don't know, human beings, how
I feel like it's
fragile we are as well as how durable we are still.
Yeah, I think it's that constant duality of like you need to work stuff out, but you got to do it safely. Or it's just like we're fragile, yet at the same time, the human condition is extremely durable and malleable, where it's like we are also really adaptive.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how do you reconcile those two things?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile maleness with traumatic brain injury that could be emotional or physical? I mean, like those are all good questions.
It's like maybe some of this idea, like, because people get frustrated with the term toxic masculinity that gets thrown around a lot, because I think people think you're saying that masculinity is toxic. No. Toxic is an adjective we're attaching to this idea of masculinity. Masculinity is not bad. Masculinity has a lot of wonderful qualities.
Absolutely.
To it, like a protectiveness and like a work ethic and those kind of like associated like with the sort of yin yang idea of what masculine energy is. What we're talking about is how that can turn toxic.
Right.
So the idea of like a pride and a protective sense or a nourishing sense, and the idea that could turn into like an impulse control, paranoia, aggression thing if it's nudged the wrong way. I think there's a thing to say, like, maybe a few things. One, maybe we could stop associating male qualities with that uncontrollable mad guy thing.
Right.
Like, don't fucking piss me off. I'm a guy. And you can't push me that far. Maybe that's not a thing that guys do. Maybe that's a thing injured guys do.
with injured brains.
Yeah. Whether injured by emotional like
or
traumas or physical ones
traumas,
that I don't know. Maybe that makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, that you would, if your brain takes those traumas early on, is like, oh fuck, we got fucked up. Maybe there's something in nature that causes you to be more aggressive and more crazy and more paranoid. As
moving
a defensive,
forward as a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a coping skill.
Yeah, like those tau proteins that while they, fuck you up and make you sad maybe or, depressed, there's also this aspect of they make you more edgy and more like defensive and more like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Because I don't want to sustain that injury again.
Right. We got to prepare for that.
Wow.
So I thought that was just a lot to think about. And I think like for guys out there who are listening who might be doing fight sports, I also, as guys in our 30s who have like trained these sports forever. Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're
I've
a true
changed,
gentleman now.
Yes, I am a scholarly gentleman of
but
40.
the point of this being like that have trained fight sports for a long time and have both had our times of we love a hard spar, let's get in there and bang it out when we're younger. Maybe don't do that.
Yeah.
The modern school of thought around boxing and striking training in general is one of avoid damage. If you get a channel change in class, which is what I was called, like that thing that happens where your whole, because TVs don't do this anymore, but when we were kids, at least, where the screen zaps white for a second before it changes to the new channel.
Yeah,
that's a little trauma. That's a little brain rattle. That's like not good for you. Yeah. And if you take those day in and day out, if you're trying to be a fighter, obviously it's part of the thing. Coming up, you're gonna train hard. But I don't know. It's just
but
stuff
if
to
it's
be
not
aware
your
of.
job, like, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Exactly.
And for a lot of people, it's not. And like, this actually, like, there are two famous ones that come to mind. And like, I don't know if you are familiar with Junior Seau, the famous San Diego Charger linebacker, one of the most famous, most dominant players in the game. I encourage you to check out his story about his effects with depression. He ultimately killed himself.
Jesus.
But one of the things that he did was he didn't shoot himself in the head. He shot himself. I'll have to fact check this. I didn't prep this story, but like he shot himself in the stomach and left a note being like, "Study my brain for traumatic brain injury."
Oh my god.
It's really sad, and it's
there's
really
a lot
telling.
Of like there's some YouTube videos I've watched that are like people put compilations of boxers early in their life and later, and it's really fucking brutal. Chris Benoit and like other wrestlers who like killed themselves or killed their family. Horrible squicky stuff. That's like people who were considered, like everybody who knew that guy was like, he was a really nice guy. I don't know how that fucking happened. I just think I don't know. My other podcast, obviously, about like mental health and stuff, has been a year-long exploration of this weirdness of our brains, and that consciousness seems to be something separate from your physical brain, but interlinked inherently. So your sense of self can be so affected. Just like we all know, we act a little different when we're drunk. We act a little different when we're mad. We act a little different when we have to go to the bathroom or we're hungry. It's very real that the physical qualities of your own brain can affect your sense of reality. And I think that's good to keep in mind for when we're really down in the dumps, when our brain is telling us to like hurt ourselves one way or another or hurt other people.
Yep.
And to go like, oh, maybe that's not real. Maybe that's just like a thing my brain is experiencing. But also to avoid the situations that might cause that.
Sure. Yeah.
If you find yourself at a martial arts school or something where like Friday night is sparring night, and that means people like go balls to the wall, and you have some coach or Sifu or sensei who just never really did the thing, and this is where their life is, and so they encourage you guys to
hard spar,
dog fight each other like every. Don't do that. Find another place.
It's okay to say no. Yeah, absolutely.
That is an incorrect way to train and be.
Sure. And I'll just end with this, is that, like, I remember last year, it was around August of last year, there was an NFL player who at 24 walked away from the sport. His name is Joshua Perry. And at 24, he retires after his 6th concussion. And he said, his quote, my well-being is more important. And for a guy who is entering the professional ranks, he had only been playing in the NFL for 2 seasons, finally being able to monetize something he's been doing his entire life for free. And then he's just like, you know what? The juice is not worth the squeeze. Yeah. I want to be able to walk and talk with my kids. And that's a very mature thought at 24. Yeah. Much less the financial stuff that could, that is obviously weighing on him. But I was just so impressed with that.
Totally.
Because that's runs so counter to so much of what the NFL is. And I know we've sort of just barely touched on that. But I just wanted to bring that up, that it's just like it is possible to walk away from something that's not good for you.
Yeah, even if it's like very tempting and very rewarding, being like, hey, come on, just keep getting beat up. We'll keep giving you money. It's going to be great.
Absolutely. Listen, you'll never have to work again. That's all. That's it. Just keep playing. Keep playing. What's the big deal?
Yeah, but was it worth it? I also, next time you catch a production of King Lear, maybe in the post-show discussion with your friends, you could be like, have you ever thought? Perhaps the madness of King Lear is because he was a warrior king in his younger days and must have suffered who knows how many blows to the head in the battlefield.
Perhaps it was a traumatic brain injury. Perhaps it was TBI,
that led to
a
this
CTE.
Civil war late in life.
Yes.
Splitting his kingdom among his daughters. Anyway.
Well.
So whatever. That was my weird exploration this week in a history of violence. CTE in the ancient world and the modern one, as it turns out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not something that has magically gone away.
Take care of your coconut.
Yeah, always protect the coconut. All right. Well, this has been another episode of the Fight Stuff podcast. Jared Sleeper. Where can people find you on the internet?
At Jarrett_Sleeper on Instagram or at Jared Sleeper on Twitter.
Excellent. You can find me, Zeke Rodrigues Thomas, at zekethomasisrad on Instagram and Twitter, I found out. I switched that over.
Good. You're good.
And then, of course, website, zekethomas.com. And, of course, follow the podcast everywhere.
Yeah. Fight Stuff Podcast on Instagram. And if you have a viral clip of the week or a subject you think would be interesting to explore on the Fight Stuff Podcast, you'd like us to maybe go deep dive on, or, in our weird sort of meandering, sometimes surface, sometimes deep, whatever thoughts about fight stuff, send it to us at fightstuffpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. We love to hear from you guys. Make sure you smash that like button, comment, and subscribe.
Review the show positively, preferably. If you don't like it, don't review it. But if you do like it, review it really high. Helps. Subscribe. Blah, blah, blah.
All that stuff. This has been the Fight Stuff Podcast. I'm Zeke Rodrigues Thomas, and as always is with me,
Jared Sleeper.
Yeah, baby. We'll see you next week.
Fight Stuff is a production of Mind Jam Media. Thank you to Jason Scardamali for making our theme song. See you next week, fight fans.